I will introduce our next two speakers, Bob Fraser and Erica Johnson. Bob Fraser is a professor at the University of Washington, Department of Rehabilitation Medicine, Neurology, and Neurosurgery. He's the head of the Neurological Vocational Services Unit, which is connected to Harborview Medical Center. Bob is an active counseling and rehabilitation psychologist, certified rehabilitation counselor, and a certified life care planner. Within neurological rehabilitation, Bob has specialized in epilepsy, brain injury, and multiple sclerosis. Bob holds a variety of degrees, including Ph.D. in rehabilitation psychology, and previously served on the board of the Epilepsy Foundation Northwest. And I might add, he was our 2013 recipient of the Arthur Ward Jr. Achievement in Epilepsy Award. And our second speaker is Erica Johnson, also PhD. She is a rehabilitation psychologist and a fellow of the American Epilepsy Society and the Health Promotion Research Center at the University of Washington School of Public Health, where she is a co-investigator on the PACES in epilepsy and Project Uplift programs. Dr. Johnson has researched programmatic variables and efficacy of epilepsy self-management interventions in collaboration with Bob Fraser and the members of the CDC-funded Managing Epilepsy Well Network since 2008. She also has research interests in the areas of neuropsychological and psychosocial aspects of disability, program evaluation, adolescence, and employment issues for people with epilepsy. Dr. Johnson maintains a clinical practice where she serves individuals with neurological, sensory, and orthopedic disabilities, as well as those with multiple and complex disabilities. For example, traumatic brain injury, chronic pain, and substance abuse issues. Oh, please welcome Dr. Fraser and Dr. Johnson. And I am happy to advance the slides if you need me to. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And out of the gates, it's always a little kind of disconcerting when you see your first slide and catch a very significant error on it. And this is not the first slide that I had prepared. And I apologize, Bob, that your name should absolutely be on here too as well. So
no worries, Erica. But your voice is a little low, or that just could be.
Oh, okay. Is this any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So yeah, Kevin, if you want to advance to the next slide, please. Thank you so much, Kevin, for inviting us to speak to everybody today. And Bob and I are both pretty enthusiastic about giving this presentation about PACES, which is an acronym for the Program of Active Consumer Engagement and Self-Management. This is an epilepsy self-management program that we developed and have been working on disseminating for a few years now, and have really enjoyed our partnership with EF Washington, and really have plenty of room to thank them here for some of the work that I'm about to describe to you. This slide here is really just meant to give you an overview of our process for developing PACES. When Bob and I sat down 13 years ago to talk about developing this project, we knew that one of the biggest objectives we had was to create an evidence-based program, meaning something that we could research that addresses the patient's needs, the consumer's needs, the person with epilepsy. And we really wanted to be able to develop a program that was informed by what people with epilepsy wanted and needed to have addressed, with the hope that that would really serve its purpose in engaging and keeping people involved in the program. Because at that time, there weren't that many epilepsy self-management programs out there, but most of the ones that were, we noticed, really had high dropout rates. So people would come in and start them, but then maybe not finish them, or maybe skip over the educational information, maybe it wasn't so relevant, and you know, want to get to the social piece. So we wanted to build something that really met the mark for people with epilepsy. So the diagram here is really to show you that we've been through a number of different stages of a process here of reviewing literature and then going straight to patients with a pretty lengthy survey and asking about the different problems they experience related to managing epilepsy, and then also the details of how they would want a self-management program put together and delivered, and what they would want to get out of it. And since that time, we've run a couple of different randomized controlled trials. So this is kind of the gold standard of how you do research with interventions to show whether or not they're scientifically supported. And we've also done some feasibility work with special populations that I'll describe in a little bit. So in a nutshell, this kind of gives you an idea of how we've gotten to the point we have. And yep, you're right on track, Kevin. Thank you. Yes, perfect. So what is PACES? Let me tell you a little bit more if you don't know already, because it is a program that Epilepsy Foundation Washington and Oregon and Orange County offer at this time. And so some of you on the call here today may be familiar with it. Some of you may not. But this is essentially a group-based, it's like a class in a way. There's 8 sessions that are offered once per week. And typically this happens, you know, either on a weekday evening or during a lunch hour, kind of whatever works for everybody in the group. And the sessions last for 60 to 75 minutes. When we did our research on this, and this was all pre-COVID, we did our research on groups that either all met in person or all met by phone, only by teleconference, because people were spread out in more rural areas. And both formats were workable. So now we're fortunately able to have this as a validated telehealth style program, which I think has been really helpful with weathering this pandemic. And there's really a focus within the group of providing education to the people attending the group, really helping with developing coping strategies for different challenges of living with epilepsy, and then also an emphasis on targeted goal setting relative to any kind of pursuit that a person in the group wants to make. And the groups are led by an epilepsy professional and then also a trained peer leader who has epilepsy. So the epilepsy professional may or may not have epilepsy, that varies. But we do like to make sure that we also have a trained peer leader who's there specifically in that role. And this is primarily for adults with epilepsy. It's okay if they also have co-occurring functional seizures. The groups are usually about 4 to 8 people. It's the same. So the group comes together to start and then kind of stays in the same group throughout the 8 sessions. And we've developed companion treatment manuals for participants. And then there's facilitator materials as well. Next slide, please. Thanks. And so I'll talk a little bit about what's involved in each of the sessions. This outline here gives you a lot of details about the first 4 sessions. So the first one presents on epilepsy and medical issues. We talk about the different causes and triggers of epilepsy and seizures, identify different seizure types, talk about kind of medical aspects, what's out there in terms of the knowledge base for treatment. And we really introduce people to this process of goal setting to manage your personal health or your personal ambitions. Then, because we did in the survey I referenced a little bit ago, we had kind of this subgroup of people who responded who said they really struggled with managing their mood and managing their stress. So we've got 2 back-to-back sessions that focus on different techniques for managing stress and the blues. And we've adapted this some over the last year to have some additional material related to COVID, because that's added kind of an additional layer of stress for everybody. And so in these 2 sessions, we really talk a lot about the relationship between epilepsy and stress and the blues. We really get into some of the nuts and bolts about the ways that our thought processes affect stress and the blues, and learn and apply strategies for managing mood, for decreasing stress and decreasing the blues. And this includes getting into things around social support and increasing positive emotion and behavioral kind of activity engagement too. The 4th session is focused on compensating for cognitive challenges. So this is focused on learning strategies and tips for managing some of the cognitive difficulties that come with epilepsy, either because of seizures or medications. Next slide, please. And then the 5th session is focused on getting the most out of community living. And so this is where your facilitators have a lot of discussion and information about things particular to the community that you live in, and talking a lot about transportation, low budget, kind of events to go to, and really there's a lot of robust exchange among group members with information and suggestion. The 6th session is on managing my epilepsy care, which is really how to effectively partner with your epilepsy care team. The 7th is learning effective communication strategies. So this is very focused on communicating your needs, accommodation preferences, what kind of help you need from somebody if you have a seizure. And then the final session is focused on health and well-being. So we talk broadly about health and well-being, but then also do kind of this deep dive into things like sleep and nutrition and exercise. Next slide. So that gives you an idea about kind of the broad overview of the 8 sessions. I've got a sample here of the introductory page from our session 2, which is focusing on stress and the blues. And there's really this process that each group, or this structure that each session follows. We have some education. For example, in session 2, we talk about stress and the blues and epilepsy, and also the role of your thoughts in stress and the blues. We talk about strategies for tracking unhelpful thoughts and ways to change those unhelpful thoughts. And then wrap things up with other strategies for beating stress and the blues. There's a heavy emphasis on participant involvement and discussion. So while we're delivering educational information, we're also engaging in a process of checking in with group members about the different goals that they're working on, getting updates from them, having discussion around the information that we're providing, things like how to apply this information to yourself, or how to use the idea that we're talking about on a specific problem that a participant might be having. There's some opportunities for reflection, for people to kind of self-reflect about the experiences that they're having and how they might apply the information that they're learning. And there's kind of this alternating back and forth with how the group is led, where the epilepsy professional and the peer facilitator are taking turns kind of back and forth. So the participants are really getting to know and interact with both leaders. And then we use the SMART framework, which is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound goals. So it's a very special kind of model. And we use that to help each person in the group set a goal for themselves, if they've got one in mind for the time in between each session. Next slide. The other piece of this is we want to know how people benefit from the group, right? So we have a screening process for interviewing folks to confirm that this is a good match for them in terms of a treatment. And then we track how they're doing before they start the PACES program and right after they've finished it, to ask them questions about mood. So we have a depression screener, we have an anxiety measure, we have a measure that gets at quality of life in epilepsy, and then 2 measures that that assess self-management ability and self-efficacy related to epilepsy. So that's kind of how you feel like you're doing with specific problem solving and how capable or ready you feel to solve particular problems related to living with epilepsy. And in our research studies, we measured, so we did these assessments of these questionnaires right before the person came into PACES, right after they finished the 8th session. And then we actually gave them the same questionnaires 8 weeks later, or sorry, that is the 8 week is right after the end of the program. We gave them another set of questionnaires 6 months later to see, like, was PACES helpful for a longer time? And then in this most recent study that we published last year, we followed folks for a year afterwards. We wanted to see if you take this course, if you do this class, this group treatment for 8 weeks, can it make a difference even a year later? And, you know, and as an aside, this is one of the important ways where the Epilepsy Foundation was a terrific partner in our work and provided support with these check-in phone calls every 6 weeks to people that had gone through PACES to kind of see how they were doing, offer information, and help kind of sustain the improvements that they had made from being in the PACES groups. Next slide, please. I'm going to briefly tell you the results of each of these trials, and by all means, if you want more details about these, I'm happy to supply you with a couple of research articles that gets into the nuts and bolts of this. But in our first randomized controlled trial, which we just did with people face-to-face over at Harborview, we found after 8 weeks that we had a treatment effect, meaning the people that were assigned to the PACES program and came to all 8 of those sessions had higher epilepsy self-management scale scores. And this was specific also to subscales around information management and lifestyle management. They also had higher self-efficacy scores, and they had higher quality of life scores in terms of their overall quality of life, and also a subscale around emotional well-being and another subscale focused on energy and fatigue. So compared to the people who didn't go through PACES at all, the people who did go through PACES benefited in this way. And then 6 months later, the people who had been through PACES still were showing significantly greater improvement with the information subscale of the epilepsy self-management measure, as well as the medication effects portion of the quality of life and epilepsy scale. So we thought that was pretty encouraging that people really did seem to do better after going through the program in terms of their ability to manage their epilepsy themselves with kind of day-to-day problem solving, and also that their quality of life improved. And with the second randomized controlled trial, we knew going into it that transportation issues are a really big deal for people with epilepsy. We had seen challenges in the face-to-face study where people wanted to come into it but couldn't get to us in person. So with that study, what we did is we had people choose whether they wanted to be in the study just by phone or come in person to Seattle. And I think over 4/5 of our participants chose to do phone only. So that really let us know that phone is an important way to be able to reach people and be able to provide this intervention. And again, this was all pre-COVID, as I mentioned. What we saw just by doing this on a telephone conference line, so no video, no Zoom, none of that, is that at the end of the 8-week program, the people who went through it had increased epilepsy self-efficacy compared to the control group. And then we also had this composite score that was an indicator of overall distress. And the people that had went through PACES were significantly less distressed than people who didn't. And we saw similar effects at 6 months. And now by 6 months, people's self-efficacy scores, self-management scores had also improved. So we think maybe there was a little bit of a time lag, a little bit of a percolation here of people learning how to apply the material and practice the material that they learned. And then at 12 months, so a whole year after the program ended, People who went through PACES were still significantly better in terms of their day-to-day epilepsy self-management and their general distress. Next slide, please. And Kevin, will you keep me honest here? How are we doing on time? Because I don't want to, Bob's got some important points to make too, and I don't want to shortchange him.
We've got 25 or so minutes, so
okay. Okay, good, thanks. So this slide shows you all, one of the things that we were really excited to know about in the study was, were we able to hold on to people, to retain people? Did the program kind of meet their needs, and did they stay in it? And so you can see some information here that actually across both the intervention and the control groups, people, once they came into the study, for the most part, stayed in it. We had a few people that we lost, but to give you a point of comparison, a lot of behavioral studies like this will see dropout rates of around 50%, and this was like 6 to 8%. So we were feeling pretty confident about the appeal of the program, the ability of the program to meet people's needs. And people, we also, for just the folks who did the PACES program, we had them fill out satisfaction ratings for us to tell us what they liked, or rate on a 5-point scale, the sessions and the way that the program is led, and all kinds of different things, how well we covered different topics. And so you can see some of the ratings here, that every aspect of the program for that first trial was rated a 4 out of 5 or higher, which we thought was, you know, that's very good / excellent or better. And the thing that participants liked the most was that 2-person leadership model of the epilepsy professional and the person with epilepsy, and also liked topic coverage and other elements. When we asked people, just kind of open-ended question, what did you like the most about PACES? The overwhelming majority of folks said that the most important piece to them was meeting other people with epilepsy. Each time we ran one of these groups, we would have people say, this is so cool, I've never met another adult with epilepsy before. And that came out too in these satisfaction ratings. So that was pretty meaningful for Bob and myself both, to see that we were really creating something here where people could forge a community for themselves. Next slide. So similar data this time for the randomized controlled trial. So just as a reminder, this was the one that we just did all by phone. And you might think, oh, maybe, you know, maybe by phone, people might not feel like they, you know, bond as much. When in fact, we saw that yet again, if you look in the lower right-hand corner of the slide with the open-ended responses to the best part of the group, that the top answer still was being part of this epilepsy group and a sense of community. We still had nice high retention in terms of keeping people in the groups once they came in. And also high ratings. We dropped a little bit on one session below the 4.0 mark. The community participation on a budget came in just slightly lower ranked. And we think that's likely a byproduct of the fact that we had to, when it came to getting that session in particular ready to give to a larger geographic area, we had to change a lot about how the material was presented and what we presented. And so we're continuously looking for ways to continue improving that for people. Next slide, please. So I want to give you just a snapshot here as I wrap things up about some of the different adaptations that we've been involved in doing, because it's really common when I talk to people about PACES. I'll tell you straight up, there's the 3 most popular questions I get are, this is great, is there something like this for people with functional seizures or what's called PNES? Is there PACES for Spanish speakers, and what about kids? I'd say those are our most popular questions. So a little ways back after doing our first trial, we did also pilot this to make sure that our project can work with rural dwelling adults with epilepsy. So Bob and I went out to more rural areas of Oregon and Wyoming and met with folks there to learn how we would need to adapt the program for them. And it's part of why we decided low tech telephone conference groups only, as opposed to Zoom, was because even in our rural areas, infrastructure is not as robust for people. And so phone was a good low tech way to make sure that we could reach and include everybody. We did some work with veterans, which also drove home the point for us that we really need to be able to do all parts of PACES by phone. That's what the majority of the veterans that we worked with let us know. And then next slide, please. And then what we're currently up to is adapting PACES for Spanish-speaking adults. So we've fully translated the program. We're getting ready to test it in another randomized control trial and doing some additional survey work with Spanish-speaking adults to also validate that all the information in the program is relevant to their needs. And we're super excited that we are also partnering with Dr. Novotny and the rest of the Epilepsy Center group over at Seattle Children's to adapt PACES for adolescents. And we're just in the formative stages of that. We actually just finished up a meeting this morning, and we're starting to recruit adolescents at Seattle Children's age 14 and older to do some focus group work with us and kind of teach us what we need to know about epilepsy self-management for adolescents. So if you're if you're a patient over there or you know somebody who is, keep your eyes peeled because for these announcements around the focus groups, because we really are super excited to be talking with some teenagers over there and learning what we need to do to make this program fit well for them. And I think that may be my last slide. Kevin, if you just pop over to the next one, I'll be able to tell you for sure.
Erica, for the adolescents, what is the age limit that you're looking at for the focus group?
It's 14 and older. We're anticipating 14 to 18 because I think 18 is the age mark that teens usually then transition over to the Epilepsy Center at Harborview at the University of Washington. If somebody's older than that and is interested, contact me and I can talk through the details. But we're looking at that kind of 14 to 18 range.
Great.
Yeah, so this is Bob. I get to turn the baton over to Bob to talk about the benefits and why would you want to do PACES in your organization or your setting.
Okay, folks, we're just going to kind of wrap this up here with the benefits, but thanks, Erica. But I want to thank Kevin and the Foundation Northwest for their partnership over the years and their delivery of PACES. And we got off the phone this morning with the Epilepsy Foundation nationally, and we're kind of thinking of some other options at different regions of the country. We appreciate the work of the Epilepsy Alliance, and we have about 100 trainers right now that we trained from Maine to down by San Diego. So we quite a range. So we're happy to see the things take off. But basically, the benefits for you as a person with epilepsy is a better understanding of epilepsy and your type of epilepsy, your medications and side effects, and treatment options. Back in the day, we had epilepsy surgery and the vagal nerve stimulator, but now we have deep brain stimulation and laser ablation, and so we present all these options, and these are things to talk about with your epileptologist. But a lot of people, particularly in rural areas, don't understand that there are options. Okay, it improves your working relationship with the neurologist. Specifically, people tend to provide more targeted information and have key questions. In the appendices of the PACES manual, that there's key questions that Dr. Poulos put together for us, the things he likes to get questioned about and provide answers for. Strategies for general health and well-being, a simple one that's missed and has a relationship to anxiety and seizure frequency is quality sleep. And so we go through pretty much everything there, exercise, diet, the works. And then mood management strategies for sadness, depression, or stress and anxiety, and treatment options. And then next slide. And then cognitive issues, particularly memory, attention, speed of information processing. We have recommended strategies we go over, but then resources that you can go to. In assistive technology, the Job Accommodation Network out of West Virginia. You don't have to have an employment issue. It can be related to independent living and cognitive issues, but everything is in there in terms of resources. Big one that people rate highly is being able to disclose and clearly present their epilepsy. When people start this session, people can be all over the map in disclosing. And we work on the 3 C's, that you're clear, you're concise, you're compact in the presentation, and that you're comfortable, because that makes all the difference in the world with an employment supervisor, in social settings, et cetera. Community engagement and reduced isolation. And that's not just engagement in your community, and a lot of that can be virtual now due to COVID, but also with the Epilepsy Foundation, epilepsy organizations, epilepsy nationally, chat rooms, all the options that are available. And so finally, PACES is a platform program. So you take our program with the 8 sessions, and depending on need, we may refer not only to all the resources in the community, but to other self-management programs. For example, Uplift for depression, or Hopscotch for cognitive issues. So we have kind of a menu that you can work off going from our PACE, our core platform program. And the next one here. So what's the benefits to your neurologist? You are a well-informed patient. You're efficiently using the neurologist's time, which in survey research is under 15 minutes per person, and you're asking targeted questions. You may also improve in your working with your doctor, asking for more time, getting the first appointment in the morning, the first one after lunch, to get that little more time before they get their schedule slams. Patients improve in general psychosocial adjustment, improvement in general communication regarding their epilepsy, understand mental health, coping strategies, understand treatment options, and the neurologist is better serving the whole person with epilepsy, and can offer off our program a menu of other self-management programs. Next was an example. You know, there's a new emphasis, particularly by EF nationally and the CDC, AES, on treating the depression, anxiety, and mood management issues. Only about a third of neurologists standardly screen for mood management problems. This is by the way, this is an article this year. Is a survey of 455 treatment professionals in epilepsy internationally, International League Against Epilepsy. 40% of the epileptologists lacked any kind of standard screening approach. If they did do it, okay, 50% cited a lack of mental health professionals on site to help with assessment. And then if they did identify depression or anxiety, mood management issues, 50% cited a lack of mental health referral options. And that certainly exists with COVID, because I mean, treatment needs have almost quadrupled, and you know, it's hard to get somebody in the door. So we have to kind of come up with treatment options, and we try to do this if people come back to us and need that kind of access. So, but this is not standardly done by most neurologists. 60% or more don't do that. Okay, the ease of PACES launch. Facilitators can be epilepsy service providers, not necessarily licensed mental health providers, not necessarily mental health counselors or psychologists, and peer facilitators identified through various means, sometimes through the foundation or affiliate, sometimes through the medical center. But we now have some peer facilitators nationally who are available to co-lead, which we really appreciate. Some of them are just excellent. Once trained, takes about 4 hours, two 2-hour sessions. Facilitator intervention time is relatively efficient, about 2 hours a week over 8 weeks. And we're available for not just for launching, but also for monthly technical assistance meetings. We do that monthly. I think our next one is December 2nd. Okay. And part 2 of this, launch. Yeah. recruitment of PACES participants can be facilitated by the area epileptologist, neurologist, your EF or your epilepsy affiliate organization board members, medical flyers, in addition to your core social communication stuff, the things you normally do out of an epilepsy organization. In our PACES RCTs, the dropout rate was less than 6%, very low dropout rate. Because people were getting a stipend, which may help a bit, but still it's a very low dropout rate. And the cost of each PACES group delivery is in a range of $1,200 to $2,500 per 6 to 8 people served. Eight is if you're kind of in person. And that's because, the mental health counselor, psychologist time would be more expensive. But, for the most affiliates delivering, the actual cost in personnel time is about $1,200. Okay, sustaining PACES. How do you do that? You want to keep doing it, but it takes some time. Potential grants from the Epilepsy Foundation. We were just talking about that today. Other epilepsy-related organizations, and some states, particularly like North Carolina, they make a real effort, at Ohio too, in getting public, community, and rural health service grants. And then foundations, nonprofit foundations, potential pharmaceutical company sponsorships. That's why we evaluate the outcome of delivery and the satisfaction with delivery, because pharmaceutical companies really want to see that. PACES participants funding contacts. People come through very happy with their experience. Who do they know? Okay. Concerned private donors. And this is interesting. I had we developed a epilepsy vocational rehab program in San Francisco, and Dr. Weber, who's a colleague and a famous epilepsy neurosurgeon, invited us down to get rolling. And I told him to get the program going, he needed about $500,000. And I thought, well, I'm not going to hear from Dr. Weber for a while. Got back to me in about 10 days, and he had the money from one donor. So, going after a person who has a good experience, or this is a very targetable thing. You can show them the outcome. You can show them, the cost, which is not, exorbitant by any stretch. So don't forget private donors. If you have mental health professionals, licensed mental health professionals, you can do billing on psychology, behavioral health codes. And some medical centers want to do this simply because they're aware of the PR value in their area market. And I won't go into details on that, but there's a lot of competitiveness in certain markets in terms of epilepsy medical providers. And so they want to be seen as serving the whole person. So just in close this out, we want to show you the whole benefit package, and depending on who you are and where you're situated, these are some of the things that we've heard and experienced over time.
So I would just add that Erica, mentioned that a lot of the time, and I'd say 99% of the time, people are meeting other adults for the first time ever interacting with another adult who has epilepsy.
Yep.
So this is really special for them. And I used to serve as a peer facilitator, as I mentioned kind of in the first presentation. I grew up with epilepsy, so I essentially qualified as a peer facilitator. The two facilitators we have now in the Washington, Oregon area, Elmer Elgato, and Elmer is a social worker, used to work in the epilepsy clinics at Swedish Hospital and Harborview, so he has a very strong understanding of epilepsy and the social and economical impacts to it. Very sensitive, compassionate guy, so a perfect fit for a facilitator. The other facilitator, the peer facilitator, John Phillips, he has epilepsy, and he went through PACES as a participant first, so learned about it that way, and now is kind of one of the facilitators. But when I was a facilitator, and I did it for at least 2 years, I want to say, back-to-back sessions. And so I got to go through a lot and meet a lot of people and listen to their stories. By the third or so, fourth week, the voices are familiar. It's done over the phone. So they start to kind of get to know the folks in this cohort, and they really start to open up and share kind of personal stories because they become comfortable with the folks that they're talking with. And you can really kind of visualize sometimes collective head nodding, as they're talking about certain topics. One guy shared that he, has to rely on the bus, and he missed the bus once, and it was really frustrating because he was already running late. And everybody immediately shared, yes, I've been there. I know exactly what that feeling is like. So it's super special. We're super lucky to have Bob and Erica kind of in our backyard here at University of Washington, because this is a national program, but Bob and Erica are so accessible and they've been great resources to us. So thank you. Thank you both. I don't know, I can't see the chat. Are there any questions, or do you have any questions for Bob and Erica?
I see one question, Kevin. It says, where do you see the 18 to 25-year-olds fitting into the PACES program? You put the ages together.
Yeah, so we do. Thanks for asking this question, Lisa. We do. So for the main part of the program that I described to you, it's all ages adults, and it really has been pretty neat. We've had oh gosh, we have a participant that I just really fondly remember who was in her 80s, and
81.
we had 81
From Bellingham.
and ones that are 18 and 19, and it's just this fun combination. So yes, absolutely, on the adult side, it's really an all ages kind of experience.
No other questions, or do we have any? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, Kev, are you offering PACES currently?
We are. So as I mentioned, Elmer and John are the facilitators.
Right.
We just finished a session
Okay.
a week or so ago. So we're starting kind of our wait list.
Okay.
We tend to do that and get 3 or 4 folks, maybe 5. If we get more than that, we found that, you always have the talkative person in the group that really anxiously wants to share a lot. And sometimes they just keep talking. So you got to kind of limit it to a smaller group. But right now, yeah, if folks are interested, we do have participants. Feel free to email us and we'll put you on the list. But we're hoping to start, our next session fairly soon.
Great.
Cool.
We really appreciate that, brother.
We really do. It's awesome. Lisa's question reminds me too, just to say that the plan with the adolescent focus groups that I was telling you about is that we will put the 14 and 15-year-olds into one focus group, and we'll put the 16, 17 and older people into a separate focus group, because developmentally that's where people start to diverge some in terms of social and school stuff. So if there's any question about the adolescents, Lisa, you got the wheels turning for me about age here, and I thought I'd clarify that.
Great.
No question is too small. Anything else that anybody's interested in asking us?
Well, certainly, if anything comes up, feel free to contact us and we'll put you in touch with Bob and Erica.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you again, Kev.
Yeah, and with that, I want to thank you guys both. This was a great presentation, and I guess that concludes our first day of our 3-day conference. And thank you all for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Nice. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Great seeing you.